Elena stood in the courtroom, the judge's gavel striking down her fate. "Guilty," he declared, his eyes full of disdain. Wrongly convicted, she was left to rot, until a letter arrived, offering her a chance to rise above the very man who ruined her life. What happened next shocked everyone. But let's start at the beginning. Elena Carter, a 34-year-old black woman, finds herself at the mercy of a corrupt judicial system that sees her as nothing more than a target. It begins with a routine traffic stop, something she's done 1,000 times before. But this time, everything goes wrong. Judge Robert Hawthorne, known for his deep-seated biases and disdain for people like her, presides over the case. When the officer accuses Elena of resisting arrest, the courtroom fills with judgment, and Elena's fate is sealed before she even has a chance to speak. Despite the lack of evidence, the judge delivers his verdict: guilty. His words are sharp, laced with racial undertones, and Elena can feel the weight of each syllable as they crush her spirit. The injustice is not just in the verdict, but in the very system that allows it to happen. She is sentenced to years behind bars for a crime she did not commit, a crime fabricated by a man who would never believe her truth. In that moment, everything changes. Elena's life, once filled with promise, is shattered. She watches as her family's faces blur with shock and disbelief from the courtroom benches. But in the midst of the devastation, they rally around her. Their love is her lifeline, and they vow to fight back, to expose the system that has wronged her. But for now, Elena is left in the silence of her punishment, her voice smothered by the weight of the system's failure. Her anger is fierce, rising up like a fire within her. It burns, hot and relentless. But she knows she must wait. For now, all she can do is bide her time in this unjust cage, knowing that her fight for justice is just beginning. Months pass, but the bitterness of Elena's wrongful conviction clings to her like a second skin. Life in prison is a never-ending fight for survival. Every day, she faces not only physical threats, but the constant reminder of a justice system that betrayed her. The concrete walls of her cell feel like a cage designed specifically for her, and every passing hour fuels a fire within her, one that burns with resentment, anger, and a deep, consuming hatred for Judge Hawthorne. Elena's thoughts grow darker with each day, as she comes to realize that the injustice she faces goes beyond one man. It's a system, a network of prejudice and power designed to keep people like her locked away. The prison becomes a mirror, reflecting the world outside, one where she is still seen as less than. She feels the weight of that every time she steps out of her cell, every time a guard looks at her with indifference, every time she is denied the basic dignity that others take for granted. The sting of being treated as less than human is almost unbearable. Meanwhile, on the outside, her family fights relentlessly. They are her lifeline, and their efforts to expose the truth grow louder with each passing day. Protests erupt, legal teams form, and social justice groups rally to her cause. Elena's case becomes a symbol, a call to action for all those wronged by a biased judicial system. The news broadcasts images of her family demanding justice, and the weight of their efforts presses down on Elena as she watches from behind bars. But while the world may be beginning to recognize her struggle, Elena's fight is far from over. Her hatred for Hawthorne and the system that allowed him to destroy her life only deepens. Each day behind bars only strengthens her resolve. The world is watching, but so is she, waiting for the moment when she can finally break free from the chains of this unjust world. One day, a letter arrives, its presence unsettling, its implications unfathomable. Elena stares at the envelope, disbelief clouding her thoughts. The governor has intervened. After months of silence, months of suffering, her ordeal is finally coming to an end. She's being released from prison. But that's not all. The letter contains another bombshell. Elena has been appointed as Judge Hawthorne's new supervisor in the Judicial Review Board. The man who destroyed her life, who sentenced her unjustly, is now under her authority. At first, it seems unreal. She sits motionless, the weight of the words sinking in slowly. Anger rises like a tidal wave, followed by an overwhelming rush of disbelief. She is free. But what does freedom mean now? What does it mean to be given such power over the very man who reduced her life to ashes? Her mind flashes back to the courtroom, to the harsh words of Judge Hawthorne, to the isolation and fear she endured behind bars. The scars, both visible and unseen, remain as raw as ever. But amid the fury, something shifts within her. As the shock begins to wear off, a deeper understanding settles in. Elena now holds the power to change the system that wronged her. She can destroy Hawthorne's career, make him suffer as she did. The temptation to exact revenge is strong, almost overpowering. But as her thoughts clear, another realization dawns. She doesn't want vengeance. She wants justice. True justice. Something that goes beyond the punishment of one man. In that moment, Elena knows her mission is far from over. She has been given a chance, not just for personal retribution, but for something much greater. The chance to dismantle the very system that allowed her suffering, to ensure that no one else will endure the same injustice. The question now is not just how to deal with Hawthorne, but how to rebuild what has been broken. In her new role, Elena dives headfirst into the monumental task of reviewing Judge Hawthorne's past cases, each one more infuriating than the last. She combs through the records with methodical precision, uncovering the clear evidence of bias that taints each decision. His rulings are not just unfair, they are systematically racist, with a glaring focus on destroying the lives of black men and women. The more Elena digs, the more she sees a horrifying pattern. Countless lives upended by the sheer prejudice embedded in his judgments. With each case, Elena's resolve hardens. This is no longer about personal revenge. This is about something much bigger. She's not just aiming to punish a corrupt judge. She's taking on the system that allowed someone like Hawthorne to rise to such power. The weight of her mission grows heavier, but so does her determination. She knows that this moment could be her only shot at bringing down the monster that has been allowed to flourish within the justice system for far too long. When the time finally comes to confront Hawthorne, Elena stands before the Judicial Review Board, her hands steady, but her heart racing. She presents her findings, detailed, irrefutable proof of his long history of misconduct. The room falls into stunned silence as the weight of the evidence sinks in. There is no denying the truth. Hawthorne's arrogance and hatred are laid bare for all to see. In that moment, the board has no choice but to act. They vote to remove him permanently from the bench. Elena's heart pounds as the decision is made. She feels the small flicker of victory, but it is a bittersweet feeling. She has toppled a giant, but the fight for true equality, for true justice, is far from over. This victory, though significant, is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Hawthorne's downfall is a personal triumph for Elena, a victory not of vengeance, but of justice, long overdue. But as she walks away, her mind is already on the next battle.